What if I told you that you can rewire your brain? Not in a metaphorical sense, not as a self-help slogan, but literally, biologically, structurally. The human brain is not fixed, it's dynamic, adaptive, and waiting for your input. Every thought you have, every behavior you repeat, every emotion you feel, it's sculpting the neural architecture of your mind. This isn't magic, it's neuroscience. And today, I want to show you how to change your brain so you can change your life. The idea that the brain can change itself used to be considered impossible. For most of the 20th century, neuroscience believed that the adult brain was fixed, that after childhood, the architecture of the brain was set like concrete. You were told that your intelligence, your habits, your personality, even your limitations were largely predetermined and hardwired. But over the last few decades, a revolution in brain science has overturned that assumption completely. We now know without question that the brain is plastic, meaning it can change. It rewires itself in response to experience, attention, and intention. This capacity is called neuroplasticity, and it is the foundation for all learning, all memory, all behavioral change, and ultimately, all personal growth. Neuroplasticity isn't something that happens only when we're children. It is not confined to early development or critical learning periods in youth. While it's true that the brain is more malleable during certain windows, especially during childhood and adolescence, what research clearly shows is that plasticity continues throughout life. Your brain is responding, right now, to how you're listening, what you're thinking about, and even how emotionally engaged you are with what I'm saying. Neurons that fire together wire together, and what you do repeatedly becomes not just what you're good at, but who you are, because the brain physically changes to reflect your patterns of thought and action. Let's take this a step deeper. Every skill you've ever learned, whether riding a bike, playing an instrument, or learning a language, has left a physical trace in your brain. New connections were formed between neurons. Some were strengthened, others weakened. That's plasticity. And this same process happens when you change your habits, when you confront a fear, when you shift a belief you've held for years. The brain is not a container that gets filled up with knowledge. It's a living network that gets sculpted by experience, pruned, rewired, and reshaped constantly. But there's a catch. Neuroplasticity is always happening, which means that if you're not actively guiding it, your brain will still change, just not necessarily in the direction you want. Bad habits, reinforced, negative thinking, strengthened, chronic stress, etched into your neural circuitry. In other words, your brain is plastic, but it's not always smart. It simply reinforces what you repeat. That's why awareness and intentionality are so critical, because the more deliberate you are about what you practice, mentally and physically, the more powerful the change. One of the most hopeful findings in recent neuroscience is that even serious brain injuries, trauma, or age-related decline don't necessarily spell permanent loss. Stroke patients who once couldn't speak or move certain limbs have regained function through intense repetition and focus. Brain scans show that entirely new regions can take over the functions of damaged areas. In aging adults, targeted learning and regular engagement with novel tasks have been shown to boost brain volume and enhance cognitive performance. All of this is due to the brain's remarkable ability to adapt, to grow, and to reconfigure itself based on input. What this means for you is profound. It means that you are not stuck. You are not your past. You are not limited by what you've been told you are. You are the sculptor of your own mind. Every time you make a decision to focus, to learn something new, to break a pattern, you are changing your brain. It may not feel like it in the moment, but underneath your awareness, neurons are firing, circuits are adjusting, and your future self is being shaped. The idea of neuroplasticity isn't just a scientific curiosity, it's a call to action. It means that your brain is waiting for you to give it a signal. And the more consistent, focused, and intentional that signal is, the more powerful the change will be. It's not instant. It takes repetition, emotion, and rest, but it works. And once you understand that, once you really grasp that the brain is a living system you can direct, you no longer need to ask if you can change. The only question is, what will you choose to become? Every thought you have is not just an abstract idea floating somewhere in your mind. It is a real, measurable physical event occurring in your brain. When you think, neurons fire, These neurons communicate through electrical impulses and chemical signals, creating patterns of activity that reflect your internal mental state. These patterns are not random, they follow circuits that have been strengthened over time through repetition and association. The more you think a certain thought, the easier it becomes to think it again, because the neural pathway that supports it becomes more efficient, more stable, and more dominant. This means that your thoughts are not passive reflections of who you are, they are active participants in shaping who you become. Each time you revisit a certain thought, whether it's empowering or self-defeating, you are reinforcing the circuits that produce that thought. Over time, these patterns can become so strong, so automatic, that they start to define your reality. You begin to believe, "This is just who I am," when in fact it's just what your brain has gotten good at doing. If you constantly think, "I'm not good enough," or "I'll never change," you are not only reinforcing that belief psychologically, you are wiring it into the very fabric of your neural network. And the brain, in its incredible efficiency, will start to anticipate and even seek out situations that confirm those thoughts, because it has been trained to prioritize them. The implications of this are massive. It means that changing the way you think is not just about being positive or motivated, it's about literally building new physical structures in the brain. And the process is the same as building a muscle: repetition, intensity, and time. If you want to cultivate new ways of thinking, whether it's more confidence, more gratitude, more focus, or more resilience, you have to practice those thoughts like you would a skill. You have to return to them again and again, even when it feels forced or unnatural. Because in the beginning, it is. You're creating new pathways in the brain, and those paths don't get built overnight, but they do get built. There is a well-established concept in neuroscience called Hebb's rule: neurons that fire together, wire together. What this means is that the more often two neurons are activated in sequence, like thinking a thought and feeling an emotion, the stronger the connection between them becomes. Over time, this leads to the formation of networks that can operate automatically. This is why certain thoughts can trigger immediate emotional reactions, not because those emotions are inevitable, but because the brain has linked them through repetition. Think of it like a mental shortcut. The more times you walk a path through the woods, the clearer and more accessible that path becomes. Your brain works the same way. It builds shortcuts to save energy, but it builds those shortcuts based on what you've practiced, not what's true or useful. This is also why changing your internal narrative, the story you tell yourself, is such a powerful way to change your brain. If you tell yourself every day that you're someone who follows through, someone who learns quickly, someone who gets stronger from setbacks, then those thoughts aren't just motivating ideas, they're instructions to your brain, they're programming. And with enough consistency, your brain will start to reconfigure itself to support that identity. You'll start noticing opportunities to take action, you'll respond differently to challenges. You'll feel different, not because you faked it, but because your brain has adapted to support the new narrative. Now, it's important to understand that this isn't about lying to yourself or pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's about choosing what to focus on and what to reinforce. Your brain can't tell the difference between a real experience and a vividly imagined one. The same circuits fire either way. This is why visualization is so powerful. When you vividly imagine a future version of yourself succeeding, solving a problem, or performing with confidence, you're activating the same circuits that would be engaged in real life. You're rehearsing success neurologically, and over time that rehearsal becomes familiarity, and that familiarity becomes behavior. There's another layer to this as well. Thoughts can actually change the levels of neurotransmitters and hormones in your body. A single thought can trigger the release of cortisol, adrenaline, dopamine, or serotonin, all of which affect your mood, your energy, your focus, and even your immune system. This is not a metaphor. This is physiology. The mind and body are not separate. What you think determines what you feel, and what you feel determines how you behave. And because behavior feeds back into thought, you enter a feedback loop, either a virtuous cycle of growth or a destructive cycle of self-limitation. So if you want to change your life, you must begin by taking responsibility for your thoughts, not by blaming yourself for having negative ones, but by recognizing that you are not your thoughts. You are the observer. You are the architect. And you have the ability and the responsibility to shape the thoughts that shape your brain. That means curating your mental diet, just like you would your physical one. What are you feeding your mind? What do you read? What do you watch? Who do you spend time with? Every piece of input is shaping the architecture of your brain. Ultimately, the message is this: your thoughts are not invisible, they are not inconsequential. They are sculpting the most powerful organ in your body, moment by moment. And when you learn to direct those thoughts with awareness and consistency, you gain the power to not only change your brain, but to change who you are. Your brain is exquisitely tuned to one thing above all else. Where you place your attention, whatever you focus on, your brain begins to prioritize. It doesn't matter whether that focus is helpful or harmful, positive or negative, your brain doesn't make that judgment. It simply adapts. Attention is like a spotlight, and where that spotlight shines, neurons start firing more frequently, pathways get stronger, and circuits begin to form or solidify. Over time, this repeated focus creates structural and functional changes in your brain, determining what you notice, how you think, what you feel, and how you respond to the world. When you understand this, you realize that attention is not just a passive experience, it's a creative force. It's the steering wheel of the brain. You can point it in any direction you choose, and wherever you direct it, that area of the brain becomes more active and more connected. The more you focus on something, an idea, a skill, a memory, a fear, the more real and dominant it becomes in your mental landscape. The brain follows your focus like a compass needle pointing north, and with enough repetition, it starts to filter out everything else. It begins to prune away the circuits that aren't being used and strengthen the ones that are. This is why what you pay attention to quite literally shapes your reality. If you constantly focus on problems, your brain becomes better at detecting them, even when they're small or hypothetical. If you consistently focus on gratitude, your brain starts to tune into the positive, not because you're ignoring problems, but because you're training your nervous system to notice what's good. This is not wishful thinking or toxic positivity, it's neuroscience. The reticular activating system, a network in your brainstem, acts like a filter for your sensory input. It lets in what's relevant to your goals, your beliefs, and most importantly, your focus. When you focus on something consistently, the brain starts to treat it as important, and suddenly, your world begins to change. You see more of what you're looking for, but focus isn't just about what you think about. It's also about what you choose to ignore. In a world overflowing with information, the ability to direct your attention, and just as crucially to protect it, is perhaps the most powerful skill you can develop. Every time you check your phone, switch tasks, scroll endlessly, or let your mind jump from one stimulation to another, you're not just losing time, you're training your brain to be distracted. You're reinforcing shallow, fragmented circuits that make deep work, deep relationships, and deep insight harder to access. And the opposite is true as well. When you sustain your attention on one thing, a problem you're solving, a piece of music you're listening to, a person you're truly present with, you're strengthening the circuits of clarity, patience, and insight. There's also a deep biological link between focus and learning. When you focus intently on something, especially when it's challenging, your brain releases neurochemicals like acetylcholine and norepinephrine. These chemicals act like highlighters, tagging that moment as important and signaling to the brain, this is worth remembering. Strengthen these connections. This is why multitasking is so detrimental to learning. Not because you're lazy or disorganized, but because your brain doesn't get the neurochemical message that any one thing is important. It just sees noise. True neuroplastic change, the kind that leads to mastery, growth, and transformation, requires focused attention over time. Emotions also play a crucial role here. When your focus is emotionally charged, whether it's excitement, fear, awe, or even frustration, it has a much stronger impact on the brain. Emotional focus turbocharges learning and memory. That's why you can remember where you were when something dramatic happened years ago, but can't recall what you ate for lunch last Tuesday. The emotional significance of an experience captures your full attention, embedding it deeply in your neural network. So if you want to change your brain more effectively, don't just focus passively, engage emotionally. Attach meaning to what you're learning or practicing, let it matter to you. Attention is also trainable. Just like you can strengthen a muscle at the gym, you can train your brain to focus better through consistent practice. Mindfulness, meditation, deep reading, and even breathwork are powerful tools for sharpening focus and strengthening the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for conscious decision-making and self-control. When you train attention, you're not just getting better at focusing, you're gaining more control over your behavior, your thoughts, and your life. And in a distracted world, that control becomes a kind of superpower. What's more, your focus is contagious. The way you show up in a room, the way you listen to someone, the way you immerse yourself in your work, it sends a signal to others, it inspires, it elevates, and it cultivates depth in a culture that often rewards surface. If you want to lead, if you want to create, if you want to leave a lasting impact, cultivate the kind of focus that commands attention not through noise, but through presence. So the question isn't whether your brain will follow your focus, it will. The question is, what are you consistently focusing on? What mental diet are you feeding your brain? Because your focus today is sculpting your brain tomorrow. And with that awareness comes responsibility and incredible power. The power to direct your own evolution. The power to change not just how your brain works, but what kind of person you become. One of the most powerful and often misunderstood principles in neuroscience is the relationship between behavior and belief. Most people wait until they feel motivated, inspired, or confident before they take action. They assume that internal states like belief, motivation, or clarity must come first, and only then will they be ready to act. But this assumption is backwards. In fact, the latest neuroscience tells us something radically different. Behavior often comes before belief. What you do changes what you think, how you feel, and even who you believe you are. When you take action, even small action, you activate brain circuits that begin to reshape your internal state. You start building evidence. You begin to create a new feedback loop. For example, if you go for a run even when you don't feel like it, you're not just getting the physical benefits of the exercise. You're also sending a powerful signal to your brain. I am the kind of person who follows through. That signal starts to get wired in, and over time your identity begins to shift. You may have started that run feeling lazy or unmotivated, but by the end your brain has released dopamine, endorphins, and norepinephrine, chemicals that elevate your mood, sharpen your focus, and reinforce the behavior. And the next time you're faced with that same choice, the neural pathway to action is a little bit stronger. This process isn't limited to exercise, it applies to anything. Learning a skill, having a difficult conversation, pursuing a goal, or building a new habit. The moment you take even the smallest step towards something, your brain starts to adjust its internal models. It begins to update your self-image based on what you're doing, not just what you're thinking. And this creates a loop. Action leads to small wins. Those wins build confidence, and that confidence fuels further action. Over time, that loop can transform your beliefs entirely. It's important to understand that your brain is constantly updating its understanding of the world and of you based on prediction and outcome. This system, often called predictive processing, is a fundamental part of how we learn and adapt. Your brain is always making predictions about what will happen if you take a certain action, and then updating those predictions based on what actually happens. When you behave in a way that contradicts your old beliefs, like showing up confidently even if you feel unsure, and the outcome is positive, your brain begins to revise the old narrative. It says, maybe I'm not as anxious as I thought, or maybe I can handle this. But if you wait to feel different before acting, you're reinforcing the old model. You're teaching your brain that your current feelings define your potential. This is especially critical when trying to break old habits or overcome fear. Fear is a protective mechanism. It keeps you from danger, but it also keeps you from change. And fear isn't just emotional, it's deeply physical. It shows up in your heartbeat, your breathing, your posture. But when you act despite fear, when you speak up, take the risk, or move forward anyway, you're overriding that fear circuit. You're teaching your nervous system that it's safe to act. And with repetition, that fear signal starts to weaken. Your behavior rewires your threat response. You become less reactive, more resilient, and more free. This is why deliberate, goal-oriented action is so powerful for changing your brain. It gives your nervous system new data, fresh evidence to contradict the limiting beliefs you've carried for years. And this data is more persuasive than any affirmation, more enduring than any pep talk. Because your brain believes what you do. Behavior is the language your brain understands best. There's a practical takeaway here that's simple but profound. Don't wait. Don't wait until you feel ready, because readiness is often the result of action, not the prerequisite for it. If you want to become a reader, start reading one page. If you want to be confident in public speaking, start by saying one sentence out loud. If you want to change your mindset, start with a single intentional behavior that aligns with the identity you want to build. Let your actions lead the way. Even small actions can trigger massive internal changes over time. That's because your brain is not looking for dramatic breakthroughs, it's looking for patterns. Repeated behaviors, even if they seem minor, are what create long-term change. And those behaviors don't just reinforce your goals, they rewrite your story. The more consistently you act in alignment with the person you want to become, the more your brain accepts that version as real. Eventually it stops being effort, it becomes your default. The great irony is that many people wait for belief to act, but belief is most often the result of action. If you want to feel confident, act confidently. If you want to believe you're capable, do the things that capable people do. The feelings will follow. Your internal state is not fixed, it's reactive, plastic and responsive to what you do. So if you want to change your brain, if you want to change your identity, start with behavior. Start small, stay consistent, and let action rewire belief. Your environment is not just a backdrop to your life, it is one of the most powerful and underestimated forces shaping your brain. Every sound, color, smell, interaction, and even the layout of the space you're in sends constant input to your nervous system, triggering responses that influence your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, often without your conscious awareness. Your brain is in a perpetual state of adaptation, constantly interpreting its surroundings and adjusting your internal state accordingly. It was designed this way for survival. In nature, being attuned to your environment was a matter of life or death. But in modern life, this sensitivity means that your environment can either work for you or against you, either reinforcing growth or perpetuating limitation. Consider how your physical surroundings affect your ability to focus. A cluttered, noisy, or chaotic space doesn't just distract you in the moment. It conditions your brain to expect distraction. The constant visual noise forces your brain to process more stimuli, increasing cognitive load and reducing the bandwidth available for deep thinking. Over time, your brain becomes less adept at concentrating, more susceptible to stress, and more dependent on external stimulation. On the other hand, an organized, calming space signals safety, order, and control. It lowers your threat response, activates your parasympathetic nervous system, and makes it easier to focus, reflect, and be creative. The simple act of tidying up or curating a space for intention, whether it's for work, rest, or creativity, can lead to measurable changes in your brain state, your productivity, and your emotional regulation. The people in your environment are just as influential, if not more so. Human brains are wired for social connection. We have mirror neurons that activate when we observe others, especially those we are close to or spend time with regularly. This means that moods, habits, and even beliefs are contagious. If you spend time around people who are negative, cynical, or passive, your brain will begin to mirror those patterns, not because you consciously choose them, but because your brain is designed to adapt to the tribe. This was an evolutionary advantage in a tribal world. Fitting in increased your chance of survival. But in the modern world, it means that your social circle can either pull you upward or hold you back. If you surround yourself with people who are curious, growth-oriented, and emotionally intelligent, your brain starts to shift in that direction. You internalize their mindset, their emotional tone, and even their vocabulary. It's not about copying others, it's about tuning your nervous system to a higher frequency. Even subtle environmental cues, like what books are visible in your space, what apps are on your phone's home screen, or what notifications you receive, shape your attention and ultimately your identity. The average person unlocks their phone dozens of times per day. Each time you do, you're reinforcing a pattern, training your brain to seek stimulation, distraction, or validation. But with awareness, you can reclaim control. You can design your digital environment to support the brain states you want to cultivate. That might mean limiting your access to apps that trigger comparison or anxiety, or creating intentional spaces for reading, reflection, or focused work. When your environment aligns with your intentions, you don't have to rely as much on discipline. Your surroundings begin to pull you in the right direction. There's also a biological basis for how the environment shapes your brain. When you experience novelty, a new place, a new sound, a new challenge, your brain releases dopamine, the chemical of motivation and learning. Novel environments increase neuroplasticity by signaling to the brain, this is important, pay attention. adapt. This is why travel, or even changing your daily route, can enhance creativity and problem solving. But the opposite is also true. When your environment becomes too familiar and predictable, your brain shifts into energy conservation mode. It stops seeking new connections. It stops growing. This doesn't mean you need constant stimulation. In fact, that can be counterproductive, but it does mean that deliberate variation, curiosity, and freshness in your environment can keep your brain more flexible and resilient. Your environment also includes the internal atmosphere you cultivate, your rituals, your routines, your systems. The brain thrives on rhythm and predictability. When you create rituals around waking up, working, resting, or winding down, you send clear signals to your nervous system about what to expect. These rituals reduce cognitive load, improve emotional regulation, and create a stable foundation for peak performance. Even something as simple as lighting a candle, playing a certain kind of music, or changing your posture can prime your brain for a different mode, whether it's focus, reflection, or restoration. Ultimately, the environments you create are extensions of your intention. They're physical expressions of what you value, what you prioritize, and what you're becoming. And because your brain is constantly adapting to those cues, shaping your environment becomes one of the most practical, powerful ways to shape your brain. You don't have to rely on willpower alone. You can surround yourself with the kinds of stimuli, people, and patterns that naturally bring out your best. When you align your external world with your internal goals, you create a synergy that accelerates change. Your environment stops being something that happens to you and becomes something you design. And when you design it with intention, you're not just changing your surroundings, you're changing your brain. Sleep is not merely a time of rest. It is a critical period of intense neurological activity where the brain engages in essential processes that directly affect your memory, mood, decision-making, emotional regulation, and even your capacity to change and adapt. The common idea that sleep is passive could not be more misleading. During sleep, your brain is actively consolidating the information you've taken in during the day, pruning unnecessary connections, strengthening the ones you need, and essentially reorganizing itself for better function. Without quality sleep, any attempt to change your brain, whether through learning, habit building, therapy, or physical training, is significantly compromised. Your brain operates through electrical activity and chemical communication, and sleep is the time when both of these systems undergo calibration. One of the most important processes that takes place during sleep is memory consolidation. When you're awake, you gather information, form experiences, and encounter emotional situations. But it is during sleep, particularly during deep non-REM sleep and REM sleep, that your brain sorts through this data, deciding what to keep, what to discard, and how to organize it. New connections are formed, and existing ones are strengthened in ways that improve recall, learning, and problem solving. Without enough quality sleep, even if you spend hours studying or practicing a skill, your brain will fail to effectively encode and retain the information. This is why sleep is as critical to learning as the learning itself. Moreover, sleep is essential for emotional resilience. When you're sleep deprived, the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, becomes hyperactive, while the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for rational thinking and impulse control, becomes less active. This imbalance creates a brain that is more reactive, more anxious, and more prone to emotional volatility. In contrast, adequate sleep restores emotional balance. It allows the brain to process difficult emotions, resolve internal conflicts, and reset mood-regulating neurotransmitters. After a full night of sleep, people often find that problems seem more manageable, thoughts are clearer, and feelings are less overwhelming. This is not just subjective, it's physiological. Sleep acts as an emotional reset button, giving the brain a chance to heal and reframe experiences in healthier ways. Sleep also supports neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change and adapt. When you're learning something new, trying to overcome a limiting belief, or working to develop a new habit, you are literally asking your brain to rewire itself. That rewiring depends on repeated activation of certain neural circuits, but just as importantly, it depends on the brain's ability to stabilize those changes. Sleep is where this stabilization happens. During sleep, especially the slow-wave phases of non-REM sleep, the brain replays patterns of neural activity from the day. This replay strengthens the new circuits and ensures that the changes stick, Without enough sleep, the brain simply doesn't have the time or capacity to integrate the change. It's like trying to write on a chalkboard, without ever letting the chalk set, the information doesn't hold. There's also a powerful connection between sleep and detoxification. During sleep, especially deep sleep, the brain activates a system called the glymphatic system, a sort of waste clearance mechanism that flushes out toxins, including beta amyloid, which is associated with Alzheimer's disease. This system is much more active during sleep than during waking hours. Without regular sufficient sleep, these metabolic byproducts accumulate, potentially contributing to cognitive decline over time. In other words, sleep is not only about performance today, it's also about long-term brain health. Skipping sleep doesn't just make you groggy, it puts your future mental clarity, emotional stability, and neurological function at risk. Sleep quality is just as important as sleep quantity. It's not enough to be in bed for a certain number of hours. What matters is the depth and architecture of your sleep. Disruptions in the sleep cycle, whether due to stress, light exposure, caffeine, alcohol, or inconsistent routines, can interfere with the body's natural rhythms and prevent restorative processes from occurring. The presence of artificial light, particularly blue light from screens, can suppress melatonin production and delay the onset of deep sleep. This shift not only impacts how refreshed you feel in the morning, but also how well your brain can perform the tasks of integration and healing during the night. Consistency plays a major role in sleep's impact on the brain. Your brain thrives on rhythm and irregular sleep patterns, staying up late some nights, sleeping in on others, or frequently changing your bedtime, can disrupt your circadian rhythm, the internal clock that governs your sleep-wake cycle. When that rhythm is out of sync, it affects the timing and quality of sleep stages, leading to poorer memory, increased stress, and impaired focus. On the other hand, when you establish regular sleep and wake times, your brain learns when to release melatonin, when to activate repair processes, and when to enter each sleep stage efficiently. Over time, this regularity builds a neurological foundation that supports high-level functioning across every domain of life. Sleep also plays a crucial role in regulating key hormones that influence not only brain function but also overall health. Sleep impacts cortisol, the body's main stress hormone, which needs to follow a healthy daily rhythm. Poor sleep leads to elevated evening cortisol levels, which can disrupt metabolism, impair immune function, and increase anxiety. Growth hormone, essential for tissue repair and muscle development, is also released primarily during deep sleep. If you're trying to improve your brain, your body, or your performance, sleep is the keystone habit, the multiplier that enhances the benefits of all other efforts. Perhaps most importantly, good sleep allows you to access higher states of consciousness, creativity, insight, problem-solving, and deep intuition. These capacities don't emerge when your brain is overloaded, exhausted, or running on survival mode. They require a rested, integrated, and well-regulated nervous system. Sleep makes space for these higher functions to come online. That's why so many breakthroughs happen in dreams, and why problems that seemed unsolvable at night appear clearer by morning. Sleep is not a break from life, it is where some of the most important work takes place. To change your brain, you must protect your sleep. It is the foundation on which everything else rests. Learning, emotional health, resilience, clarity, creativity, all of it begins and ends with how well your brain recovers each night. And while sleep is a deeply biological process, it is also something you can influence with conscious choices. You can create the conditions for your brain to restore, grow, and evolve, one night at a time. Your breath is one of the most powerful tools you possess for changing the state of your brain and nervous system. Yet it is often overlooked because it is so automatic, so constant, that we forget its profound influence. Breathing is not just about oxygen. It is a direct interface between the conscious and unconscious parts of the brain. It is one of the few physiological functions that is both involuntary and voluntary, meaning you can let it happen naturally or you can take control of it. And when you do take control of it, when you breathe with intention, you gain access to a deep lever for shifting how you feel, how you think, and how you respond to the world. Every breath you take sends signals to your brain about your internal state and your external environment. When your breathing is fast and shallow, it tells your brain that you're in danger. It activates your sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the fight or flight response. This response is incredibly useful in moments of real threat, but in modern life it is often triggered unnecessarily by emails, traffic, deadlines, or even thoughts. And when this stress response is chronically active, it can rewire your brain to be more anxious, reactive, and easily overwhelmed. On the other hand, slow, deep, rhythmic breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is associated with rest, recovery, and calm. It signals safety. It tells the brain and body that it's okay to relax, to digest, to think clearly, and to heal. This is why conscious breathing practices can have such a profound impact. When you intentionally slow down your breath, especially your exhalation, you are directly influencing the vagus nerve, a major communication highway between the brain and the body. The vagus nerve regulates heart rate, digestion, and inflammation, and it's heavily involved in emotional regulation. Stimulating this nerve through slow breathing has been shown to reduce anxiety, lower blood pressure, improve focus, and even enhance social connection. This isn't speculation or pseudoscience. It's backed by decades of neuroscience and physiology. Breathing also impacts your brain's oscillatory rhythms, the electrical patterns that influence attention, perception, and awareness. Research has shown that nasal breathing, in particular, is linked to the activity of brain regions involved in memory and emotional regulation, such as the hippocampus and the amygdala. When you breathe deeply through your nose, you are not only increasing oxygen flow but also modulating the rhythm of neural firing across the brain. This rhythmic synchronization helps organize thought processes, enhances mental clarity, and improves your ability to process complex information. In high-stress situations, your breath is the fastest way to interrupt the stress response and regain control. Unlike meditation, which often takes time to induce a state of calm, certain breathing patterns can produce immediate changes in brain chemistry. For example, cyclic sighing, a technique that involves a long inhalation through the nose, followed by a second quick inhalation and a slow, extended exhalation, has been shown to reduce physiological markers of stress within minutes. These kinds of tools are incredibly powerful because they are accessible anytime, anywhere, and they require no equipment, no guidance, just awareness and intention. The way you breathe also shapes your long-term brain structure and function. Chronic shallow breathing, often a result of stress or poor posture, trains the brain to stay in a low-level state of hypervigilance. It can reduce your brain's ability to enter deep restorative states and limit your capacity for focus and creativity. Conversely, training your breath through daily practice builds resilience into your nervous system. Over time, your baseline state becomes more calm, more centered, and more capable of handling challenges without being thrown into chaos. Breathwork has also been used to access non-ordinary states of consciousness. Practices like holotropic breathing, pranayama, and other ancient techniques can shift brainwave activity in ways that resemble those seen in deep meditation, dreaming, or even psychedelic states. These altered states are not just mystical experiences, they are deeply neurological. They can help people process trauma, generate insight, and reframe deeply rooted patterns. The breath becomes a vehicle for exploration and transformation, guiding the brain into territories that are otherwise hard to reach through ordinary thought or conversation. It's also worth noting that breath is inherently rhythmic, and rhythm itself is a powerful organizing principle in the brain. The brain thrives on predictable patterns. Rhythmic breathing creates a kind of internal metronome that helps stabilize neural circuits, especially those related to attention and executive function. This is why breathing practices are often used before high-performance tasks, whether by athletes, musicians, or public speakers. The breath anchors the mind. It creates coherence between thought, action, and emotion. Breathing is also deeply tied to awareness. Every time you bring attention to your breath, you are strengthening the circuits in the prefrontal cortex responsible for mindfulness and metacognition, your ability to observe your own thoughts and behaviors. This kind of self-awareness is essential for any meaningful change. It allows you to pause, reflect, and choose how to respond instead of reacting out of habit. And the more you train that awareness through breath, the more control you gain over the direction of your life. In many ways, your breath is a mirror of your mind. Anxious thoughts create anxious breathing. Calm, centered thoughts are reflected in slow, steady breaths, but the connection is bidirectional. You can use your breath to change your mind just as much as your mind changes your breath. It's an open channel, one that is always available, always responsive, and always under your influence if you choose to engage with it. So when we talk about changing the brain, we must include the breath. It is not just a side note, it is a core mechanism through which you can influence your entire neurophysiology. By practicing conscious breathing daily, even for a few minutes, you are teaching your brain how to calm itself, how to focus, and how to operate from a place of balance rather than reactivity. You're not just breathing, you're rewiring. Movement is far more than a way to build muscle or burn calories. It is one of the most potent tools we have to influence the function, structure, and chemistry of the brain. From the earliest stages of life, movement and brain development are inextricably linked. As infants crawl, walk, and explore their environments physically, their brains are undergoing massive growth, forming new connections that allow them to make sense of the world. This connection between body and brain does not end in childhood. In fact, throughout your entire life, physical movement remains a direct gateway to cognitive clarity, emotional regulation, and enhanced neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change. When you move your body, especially in intentional or rhythmic ways, you activate numerous systems within the brain. One of the most immediate effects is the increase in blood flow to various brain regions, particularly the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for executive functions like decision-making, planning, and focus. This increased circulation delivers oxygen and nutrients that are essential for optimal brain performance, while also helping to flush out metabolic waste. As a result, after just a short period of movement, even a brisk walk, the brain becomes more alert, more focused, and more capable of processing complex information. But movement does more than sharpen focus in the moment. It also triggers the release of neurochemicals that have long-term effects on brain health. Physical activity stimulates the production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, often referred to as fertilizer for the brain. BDNF supports the growth of new neurons, strengthens existing connections, and protects the brain from degeneration. The more consistently you move, the more BDNF you produce, creating a kind of upward spiral of cognitive resilience and adaptability. This is especially important when you're trying to change deeply ingrained habits or thought patterns, because BDNF makes the brain more flexible and receptive to new information. In addition to BDNF, exercise also boosts levels of dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins, all of which play a vital role in mood regulation, motivation, and stress management. Dopamine, in particular, is involved in learning, reward, and habit formation. When you move your body and experience a surge of dopamine, you're not just feeling good, you're reinforcing the circuits of motivation and reinforcing the capacity for disciplined effort. This is why regular movement can reduce symptoms of depression, anxiety, and brain fog. It brings the emotional centers of the brain into balance and helps regulate the nervous system, which is essential for maintaining clarity and composure under pressure. Movement also helps synchronize different regions of the brain. Activities that involve coordination, balance, or learning new patterns, like dancing, martial arts, or playing a sport, require the integration of multiple sensory systems and motor pathways. This integration enhances communication between the hemispheres of the brain and strengthens neural networks involved in attention, memory, and spatial awareness. Even simple cross-lateral movements, like walking or crawling, can create this effect by promoting hemispheric balance and neural integration. In this way, movement becomes not just a physical act, but a full brain exercise. Furthermore, movement influences your internal rhythms, your circadian cycle, hormone levels, and sleep-wake patterns, all of which affect brain function. When you move regularly, especially during daylight hours, you help entrain your circadian rhythm, leading to better sleep, more stable energy levels, and more consistent mental performance. Morning movement, in particular, has been shown to anchor your biological clock and optimize the timing of key neurotransmitters throughout the day. This rhythm creates a foundation of stability that your brain can rely on, especially when you're navigating change or stress. Another powerful aspect of movement is its ability to shift emotional and psychological states. The posture you hold, the way you walk, the pace at which you move, all of these send messages to the brain about how you're feeling and what kind of environment you're in. Just as emotions can influence posture, posture can influence emotions. This bidirectional relationship means that by changing how you move, you can change how you feel. For instance, adopting a more upright posture with open chest and steady breath can signal confidence and safety, reducing feelings of anxiety or defeat. Moving with energy and purpose can trigger feelings of empowerment and clarity. Over time, these physical shifts can recondition your emotional patterns, offering a somatic path to psychological change. Movement also provides a unique opportunity to engage in mindfulness. Unlike seated meditation, which involves stillness, mindful movement allows you to bring awareness to your body in motion, to feel the rhythm of your breath, the placement of your feet, the swing of your arms. Practices like yoga, tai chi, or even mindful walking are not just beneficial for flexibility or relaxation, they are profound tools for integrating the mind and body, reducing stress and fostering presence. This embodied awareness strengthens neural circuits associated with interoception, the ability to sense what's happening inside your body, which is closely linked to emotional intelligence and self-regulation. The key is consistency and intentionality. You don't need to be an athlete, and you don't need hours of intense exercise to experience the brain-changing benefits of movement. Even short, regular bouts of movement throughout the day can have a significant impact. Walking while thinking through a problem can unlock creativity. Stretching during a break can re-energize your mind. Taking the stairs instead of the elevator can offer a brief but meaningful boost in alertness and mood. What matters is that you see movement not as something separate from cognitive or emotional growth, but as a foundational element of it. When you move your body, you are giving your brain the signal that you are alive, engaged, and adaptable. You are reminding it of its natural state, one of fluidity, energy, and connection. In a world where so much of life is sedentary and digital, reclaiming the power of movement is not just about health, it is about awakening the brain's full potential. Every step, every stretch, every breath taken in motion is a message to your nervous system. I am here, I am present, I am growing. What you eat does not just fuel your body, it literally becomes the building blocks of your brain. Every thought you think, every memory you recall, every emotion you feel is influenced by the food you consume. The brain, despite comprising only about 2% of your body weight, consumes approximately 20% of your daily energy. This energy isn't just about calories, it's about the specific nutrients that are required for neurotransmitter production, structural maintenance of neurons, regulation of inflammation, and overall neural communication. In other words, the food you eat is directly shaping the physical and chemical landscape of your brain, determining how well it can function, adapt, and thrive. The brain is an extraordinarily metabolically active organ. To support its functions, it relies on a steady and balanced supply of nutrients, especially glucose from complex carbohydrates, healthy fats like omega-3 fatty acids, and a range of vitamins, minerals, and amino acids. When you feed your body processed foods that are high in sugar, trans fats, and artificial additives, you're introducing compounds that can disrupt brain function. These types of foods can promote systemic inflammation, which doesn't just affect your joints or your gut, it affects your brain directly. Chronic low-grade inflammation has been linked to depression, anxiety, cognitive decline, and neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. Even more subtly, it impairs your brain's capacity for clarity, focus, and resilience. Your gut and brain are in constant communication via the gut-brain axis, a bidirectional pathway that connects your gastrointestinal system with your central nervous system. The health of your gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria that live in your digestive tract, plays a significant role in this communication. These microbes are involved in the production of neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and GABA, which influence mood, motivation, and stress regulation. An imbalance in your gut microbiota, often caused by poor diet, stress, antibiotics, and lack of fiber, can result in dysregulated mood, increased anxiety, and cognitive fog. Conversely, a diverse and healthy gut microbiome, supported by a diet rich in plant-based fibers, fermented foods, and polyphenols, contributes to better emotional regulation, sharper cognition, and increased neuroplasticity. Essential fatty acids, particularly DHA and EPA found in omega-3s, are critical for brain health. These fats are not just fuel, they are structural components of the brain cell membranes, helping neurons communicate more effectively. They also have anti-inflammatory properties that protect the brain from damage and support its ability to adapt and change. A deficiency in these fats has been associated with mood disorders, cognitive impairment, and even accelerated brain aging. Incorporating sources like fatty fish, flax seeds, walnuts, and algae can directly influence how well your brain processes information and manages emotions. Protein intake is equally vital, not only for muscle repair but for neurotransmitter synthesis. Neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, and acetylcholine are made from amino acids, the building blocks of protein. If your diet is lacking in quality protein, your brain may not have the raw materials it needs to produce these crucial chemicals in adequate amounts. This can subtly but powerfully influence your mood, your energy levels, your motivation, and your capacity to concentrate or feel pleasure. Including a variety of protein sources, plant-based or animal-based depending on your preference, ensures that your brain is properly supported at a chemical level. Micronutrients such as magnesium, zinc, iron, B vitamins, and vitamin D also play indispensable roles in brain function. Magnesium helps regulate the excitability of neurons and supports calmness and sleep quality. Zinc is involved in synaptic signaling and immune regulation. Iron is necessary for oxygen transport, and without enough of it, mental fatigue and fog can set in. B vitamins are deeply involved in energy metabolism within brain cells and the synthesis of critical neurotransmitters. Vitamin D, though traditionally associated with bone health, has receptors in brain tissue and influences mood, immune function, and neurodevelopment. Deficiencies in any of these nutrients can create subtle but cumulative impairments in brain function, which often go unrecognized but significantly affect overall quality of life. Sugar, when consumed in excess, has a particularly disruptive effect on the brain. While the brain needs glucose to function, refined sugars cause rapid spikes and crashes in blood sugar levels, which destabilize mood, impair focus, and increase cravings. Moreover, chronic overconsumption of sugar is associated with insulin resistance in the brain, which has been implicated in cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease, sometimes even referred to as type 3 diabetes. Reducing added sugars and focusing on slow-burning carbohydrates like whole grains, legumes, and vegetables helps maintain stable energy levels and supports long-term brain integrity. Hydration is another frequently overlooked but critical aspect of brain nutrition. Even mild dehydration can impair attention, memory, and mood. The brain is composed of about 75% water, and water is essential for maintaining the electrolyte balance that allows neurons to fire properly. Regular intake of clean water, herbal teas, and hydrating foods like fruits and vegetables supports mental performance and helps flush out toxins that could otherwise impair cognitive function. Beyond the biological, there is also a psychological aspect to eating. The act of choosing foods that nourish your brain is a declaration of self-respect and intention. It is a ritual of care that reinforces your commitment to mental clarity and emotional balance. Mindful eating, slowing down, chewing thoroughly, and appreciating your food has been shown to enhance digestion and nutrient absorption while also reinforcing neural pathways associated with self-regulation and awareness. The relationship between nutrition and the brain is dynamic and powerful. When you consistently feed your body nutrient-dense, whole foods, you are creating the internal conditions for change. You're enhancing the brain's plasticity, protecting it from oxidative stress, balancing neurotransmitter levels, and supporting the hormonal systems that influence energy, mood, and motivation. You are giving your brain the tools it needs to rewire, to let go of limiting beliefs, to form new habits, and to adapt to new challenges. In a world where convenience foods and fast gratification dominate, choosing to eat for brain health is a revolutionary act. It is a reclaiming of your inner environment. It is a way of saying, I choose clarity over chaos, presence over distraction, vitality over numbness. The food you eat is not just a reflection of your health, it is an expression of your intention to grow, to evolve, and to live fully. Every bite is an opportunity to change your brain, and in doing so to change your life. The quality of your relationships has an undeniable influence on your brain and mental well-being. From the moment we are born, we are wired for connection. The human brain is built to thrive in social environments, and we rely on the relationships we form throughout our lives to support our emotional, cognitive, and even physical health. In fact, the people you surround yourself with, family, friends, colleagues, and even casual acquaintances, can shape your brain, your behaviors, and your perceptions in profound ways. The very nature of your connections can determine how your brain responds to stress, processes emotions, and engages with the world around you. The brain is highly social, and its architecture is deeply influenced by the interactions we have with others. Social engagement can trigger a cascade of neurochemical reactions that promote feelings of safety, happiness, and trust. When we connect with others, especially through positive, meaningful interactions, our brains release oxytocin, often referred to as the bonding hormone or the love hormone. This chemical plays a key role in forming social bonds, fostering empathy, and promoting prosocial behaviors. Oxytocin not only strengthens the neural circuits that support attachment, but it also has a calming effect on the brain. It can reduce the stress response, lower heart rates, and buffer against anxiety. In essence, strong, supportive relationships help you manage stress more effectively, regulate emotions, and maintain a sense of security, which directly impacts your brain's ability to function optimally. In addition to oxytocin, positive social connections also influence the release of dopamine, the neurotransmitter involved in reward, motivation, and pleasure. When we spend time with people we enjoy and trust, dopamine levels increase, enhancing our sense of well-being and reinforcing behaviors that promote connection. This is why we tend to seek out relationships that bring joy, validation, and a sense of belonging. The more we engage in these kinds of relationships, the more our brains become wired to seek out and appreciate social interactions, creating a positive feedback loop that enhances both our emotional health and our cognitive functioning. On the other hand, the quality of our relationships can also contribute to negative mental states. Social isolation or toxic relationships can lead to chronic stress, anxiety, and even depression. When we feel disconnected from others, or when we are surrounded by negativity or conflict, our brains perceive these situations as threats. The stress response becomes activated, flooding the body with cortisol, the primary stress hormone. Over time, prolonged exposure to high levels of cortisol can impair brain function, particularly in areas involved in memory, emotional regulation, and decision-making. This is why loneliness and toxic relationships are so damaging to mental health. They not only affect how we feel in the moment, but can lead to long-term changes in brain structure, reducing the brain's capacity for growth, resilience, and adaptation. In contrast, supportive relationships that provide a sense of safety and validation help to create an environment in the brain that is conducive to growth and learning. Social support has been shown to protect against the negative effects of stress, improve emotional regulation, and even enhance cognitive function. When we have people who believe in us, support us, and challenge us in healthy ways, we are more likely to take risks, push ourselves, and try new things. These kinds of relationships help us build confidence and resilience. They provide the psychological safety we need to stretch beyond our comfort zones and grow, both intellectually and emotionally. Moreover, the brain's ability to empathize, to understand and share the feelings of others, is an essential part of human connection. Empathy allows us to relate to others on a deep, emotional level, and it fosters cooperation and social cohesion. It is a skill that can be cultivated through positive social experiences, and it has a profound effect on brain function. When we practice empathy, we activate brain regions such as the anterior insula and the anterior cingulate cortex, areas involved in emotional processing and understanding the perspectives of others. These neural circuits help us navigate complex social situations, resolve conflicts, and form deeper, more meaningful relationships. The types of relationships we form also matter significantly. While romantic and familial relationships are central to our emotional lives, friendships, especially those that provide genuine support, laughter, and mutual respect, are just as important. A solid network of friends and a community of like-minded individuals provide opportunities for shared experiences, emotional release, and intellectual stimulation. These relationships offer a sense of belonging, which is vital for mental health and well-being. They help reduce feelings of isolation and loneliness, promote positive self-esteem, and provide a source of joy and fulfillment. In summary, the relationships you form have a profound impact on your brain and mental well-being. Social connections are not merely a luxury, they are a critical component of mental health and cognitive function. When we prioritize positive, supportive relationships, we create a psychological environment that fosters growth, resilience, and adaptability. The people you surround yourself with influence the very structure and chemistry of your brain, and by choosing to nurture meaningful relationships, you are not only enhancing your emotional well-being, but also setting the foundation for a healthier, more vibrant brain. Would you like me to help with any other part of your speech?